Welcome to the Plant-Centered and Thriving podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Kitchens. Today, I am so excited to present to you a best of episode from this past year. I've pulled all of my favorite nuggets of information from all of the experts and professionals I've had the pleasure and privilege of interviewing this year, and I'm condensing them all into one episode so that you can listen to their words of wisdom for you. I hope you enjoyed this episode and are as excited as I am to listen to it. Here is part one, Best of 2021. My first guest is Corinne. She is a certified holistic nutritionist, and she discusses being an advocate for yourself and listening to your body, that the body does not lie. Let's listen to Corinne.
Clients will come to me and be like, I feel crazy because I'll tell my doctor, like, I don't feel right, or, my hair is falling out, or they'll just be like, oh, it's from, they'll just say, oh, it's fine, you're getting older, or you're 30 now, so that's why this is all happening, or that's why you're not able to lose weight anymore because now you're 30, or all these things where they feel crazy because they're like, I know something is off, but my blood work is coming back normal. And of course, I'm a proponent of getting blood work and running your labs. It's really important to check all those numbers out, but it's just not the end all be all, especially with hormone levels, because the normal ranges are just not the optimal ranges. So that's why seeing maybe like a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor or a holistic nutritionist who will look at ranges in more of an optimal way is really important, because and also looking at what is actually going on in the person. What are the symptoms that they're presenting with? Because the body doesn't lie. And that is what I always really look at with somebody, because I don't care what my blood work said. I still had no period. I had facial hair growth. I had IBS. I had all these rashes and migraines. Like, obviously something was wrong, because our body is not meant to just do that. So it doesn't matter what the blood work was saying. I knew something was up, and just trusting yourself enough to know that keep advocating for yourself, go to a different doctor, look for, a more natural approach. If you know that something is off and you're not getting the response that you need, you're not obligated to stay with that doctor. You could look somewhere else for someone who is actually going to help you in a more supportive way.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that. Alex is a nutrition and mindset coach, and she's the owner of the Fuel Method. She discusses the definition of willpower. She talks about when she started and how everything felt so hard and restrictive, but she learned to dig deeper on her why, and then everything felt much more aligned, and that effort didn't feel so hard. Here's Alex.
When you look at the definition of willpower in the dictionary, it literally means control exerted to do something or restrain impulses, the ability to delay gratification, and to resist short-term temptation in order to meet your long-term goals. And in the weight loss world, in the healthy living world, in the plant-based world, you're like, yeah, I want that. Like this, like, I want to be able to delay my gratification. I want to be consistent in the short term to meet my long-term goals. Like I want willpower. I want that. But the first part of that was control exerted to do something or restrain impulses. And that, to me, when I was, getting more and more and more into the mindset work behind all of this, that like, I just realized that your control or restraint or the restriction that you're feeling was never meant to be associated with your lifestyle. Like your lifestyle, like who you are, should not feel controlled or restrained, or like you can't be the person that you want to be. But that came down to getting clear on why you want to be doing what you're doing. That it's when you get clear on what your goal is and why you want it, then you start to be able to like dig a little bit deeper than like what just like the basis of the goal is. Like, yeah, I want to lose weight. Like, okay, let's go a little deeper than that. Why did I want to lose weight? And then I say, well, I want confidence. Like, okay, well, what is that going to bring you? And why do you want that? And you just keep digging deeper and deeper into the why. And then it starts to come out. And once you have the why, when you feel it like deep in your heart, you just keep asking, well, why do I want that? And why do I want that? Then that effort, that force it doesn't feel so effortful and forceful, because you feel so much more aligned and connected to why you actually want it. Because on the base, like on the surface, the goal can feel so far away, and so then when you're not connected to like the journey of getting there, like that's really like where the why can like help you pull yourself through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex walks you through questions that she takes her clients through to help them start their journey, to start envisioning their future self and how that person acts and what they do or say. So here's Alex. Instead of using things like willpower and restriction and like making this lifestyle feel really forced, like what do you encourage people to do instead, in addition to really digging deep with that why? I know you kind of talk about even just the opposite of those terms.
Mhm. Well, so I have like some questions that I take my clients through that I think would be helpful, is to just start with, what do I want?
Mhm.
Like your goal, the results, the dream, like the fruits of your labor, what do you want? And then why do I want it? And that's what I was saying before, is like really dig into the why do I want that? Why is that important to me? Why do I want that? You keep asking why. What do I believe that will bring me? Why do I want that? You just keep going with that. I know it can go, you can go for that for like 5 or 10 minutes. Then getting clear, you say, who do I want to be? This is one of my favorite questions. When you think about who your future self is, how does she act in those social situations? Like, imagine yourself a year from now. How does she act at the holiday party, or how does she plan ahead in her week? And you start envisioning this future version of yourself that you feel like you're not there yet. Because I think what you were just saying is like, we've been brought up in this diet culture that right now in the present moment, we feel like to get to that future self, we have to be like super tight and like hold tightly on to the rules. Where when you think about your future self, like I envisioned mine feeling free around food and feeling empowered around food, and just knowing, that I could make any situation work no matter how I felt, and knowing that like I could let go of that perfectionism. Getting back, you say, who do I want to be? And you get really clear on that. If and when the logical brain starts to sneak in, you're like, yeah, but time, but kids, but money, but I don't know. Ignore the logical brain when you do this exercise. And then you say, how do I start to take action as if I'm already that person? So you start then, like once you map that out, once you envision her, you paint the picture, you got it clear in your head, then you start to say, okay, well, if I was in that situation, like if I was my future self right now, how would she act, or how would she respond, or how would she prepare for this, instead of acting in where we are right now.
I love that. Yeah. Adam Stanaland is a PhD student at Duke. He discusses how he thinks the stereotypes, the gender norms of men, masculinity, and meat consumption will affect the plant-based industry. Let's listen to Adam. So I'm curious, as we're talking about the stereotype with meat consumption and kind of the background there, the psychology behind that, but what does this possibly mean for the plant-based industry? We kind of talked in the beginning about how things are starting to change. Like we're not seeing maybe as many commercials that are geared towards, targeting men with meat consumption, but what possibly could this mean for the plant-based industry?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think about the answer in both what are our short-term goals and what are our long-term goals? Or are our goals more related to trying to get more people to eat plant-based, or are they more related to trying to break down these stereotypes that cause this problem in the first place? And I'll explain that. So in the short term, I think what a lot of environmentalism people have found is that if we make environmentalism seem more masculine, then we're going to be able to move more men in the short term toward those behaviors, whether that's saving water or planting trees or driving a Prius or whatever it is, we can make it. But then it begs the question, is that just buying into the same kind of gender norm stereotypes that got us here in the first place, right? If we're like, look, it can be masculine and feminine, well, why can't it just be for everyone in the same, like, why does it need to be? So I think in the short term, if we really want to move men in the direction of eating less meat, we could make plant-based eating seem more masculine. But I think as a gender researcher and a social norm researcher, that one kind of like hurts me a little bit, because ultimately we want to just break down the gender norms themselves. And so, but that's a much, much harder thing that is kind of up to the job of psychologists rather than up to a job of like marketers, right? Because marketers can go and say like, we're going to make all of these like Beyond Burgers and all these things, like put beet juice in them so they look like meat or whatever, and make them very male focused, male driven. And that's going to be great in the short term to get more men to uptake plant-based eating. But in the long term, be actually just great to over kids' development, just break down those gender norms so that they don't ever experience that in the first place. So when a kid gets to the age of like, they can choose their own foods and stuff, they would be shocked to hear that only men eat meat or men eat meat. Like they would be like, what are you talking about? Like everyone, that's silly to think about. And so I've actually seen that in some of my work with kids. I haven't looked at the meat thing with kids specifically, but have been interviewing a bunch of 10 to 14-year-old boys, and have found that like more than a few on the more progressive side of things say like, we have a thing about like wearing a pink t-shirt, which I think when growing up, actually you and I were like, boys don't wear pink or whatever. And so it's like, and some of these kids, we present them with that, like someone made fun of you for wearing a pink t-shirt. And some of the kids are like, I don't get it. What do you mean? Why would they do that? So it's like, just like this whole kind of like paradigm shift of, if we can just address these gender norms and stereotypes when kids are young, maybe we can prevent them from even like thinking about meat as masculine in the first place. So that's the long-term goal, right? But in the short term, if we want to improve the plant-based eating, you can, I think, and work with your clients. If you work with men specifically, you can, and they have this problem, just approaching it from like all kinds of people eat plant-based. It's not just men or women, it's just all kinds of people, rather than saying, oh, it can be masculine. Look at this athlete, which I know we want to do. And there's that cool Netflix documentary and stuff. So we're actually trying to test whether that is a way to get men to eat more masculine versus like some of these other messaging things. But I would say the ideal goal is to say focus on like all people do it. It's good for humanity. It's good for your body, rather than other men do it, like strong men do it, that kind of messaging. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Maybe strong people do it.
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Strong people. Yeah.
Yeah. Catherine is a registered dietitian. She's the plant-based RD on Instagram. Go follow her if you haven't already. And she talks about the advice that she would give to people who are just transitioning to plant-based eating. She discusses progress over perfection, something that you and I are both about, and explains why each experience is a learning experience and how you can avoid letting perfection limit you. Here's Catherine. So with transitioning, and if you could even go back and tell yourself a piece of advice, or even something that you tell your clients as they're transitioning, one thing you did say is that you went overnight, and it's not typically something you recommend maybe for clients, but what's like maybe like the main piece of advice that you tell people as they're transitioning, or you would even go back and tell yourself?
Yeah, I would say don't aim for perfection, because it doesn't exist. I think that is probably the most important thing that I've learned along the journey, because I know while yes, all my intentions have always been vegan, there are things that unfortunately are just kind of out of your control, and we don't live in a vegan world, at least yet, hopefully. I don't know.
Yes.
But at least when it comes to perfection, I know that can oftentimes bog people down and make them feel bad if, like, for example, if someone gives you something accidentally and they say, oh yes, this is vegan, and then you find out later like, oh, it actually was not vegan, like that does not revoke your vegan card or anything like that. It always makes any of us feel bad when we don't do something 100%. But at the same time, I think if you want to really thrive on this lifestyle, it's realizing like, hey, not every situation is going to be perfect. You have to try and make the best of it and learn from it, right? Like that's, I think, the beauty of life in general, is that there's always a learning opportunity. And if you give yourself an opportunity to learn versus getting frustrated, you will become, a better version of yourself down the road. So don't let perfection limit you right now.
Yes, I completely agree. Kim is a running and health coach, and we discuss that mutual respect for both partners if they eat differently. We discuss the struggles and what things worked and what didn't work in order to meal plan, shop, and prep for everyone who eats differently in the household. Here's what Kim has to say. And I like what you said as well, that you both have sort of a mutual respect for one another when it comes to how you eat, which I think is really important, especially when there is kind of just a little bit of a division in the way that like partners eat in the household. It is really helpful to have that like core mutual respect for one another with how they're eating. Like you said, you're not forcing him to eat meat. He's not forcing you to not eat meat. There's a mutual respect, which I think is helping both of you be very successful throughout, your own journeys as well.
It is, absolutely. And I won't say that it's not without its struggles. Like when it kind of, there are times where things are busy or, I'm training for something or he's training for something. And it's just like, for the love of God, like, could this just be easier? Like if I could just make the same thing, because it took a learning curve to have to realize that I had to plan out basically bases of things, and then I would put mine on top of it. So it's like when I'm planning food for the week, it's like, okay, are we doing salads here? Are we doing veggies here? Are we doing tacos? And it's things like I will make faux beef crumbles and then I'll have a pan of ground beef going. And like, if you look in our fridge at any given time, there are things that are labeled that's like ground beef, like don't eat that.
Yes.
It's really about planning out, for all intents and purposes, the sides. So it's like, okay, are we doing salads? Are we doing fries? Are we doing veggies? Are we doing fruits? It's like figuring all of that out and then going on top of it with, okay, what protein am I adding for him? What protein am I adding for me? What things can be shared throughout the week? What am I eating that looks the same as his, or what do I need to like substitute in and out? And so that's kind of how my grocery shopping looks like when I sit down and plan out the week. It's like, okay, what are all the different proteins? What are all the different bases? Like, how does this going to look? What's in the fridge? And then I have to go back and go, okay, what is he going to eat without my knowledge? That's going to screw this up. Yep. Because we did have a point where like, he's training so much that he's just kind of grazing and hungry all the time. And so I had to figure that out, because I would come back and he would have had like a hamburger on a bun, and then he would have eaten another bun. And I'm like, I didn't do the math for you to just eat a roll.
I love that. And I love that you're highlighting the fact that like what is also helpful. Like, first of all, it doesn't come without its challenges, which I also think is important to know. Yes. And that you find help, because you are the primary food shopper and planner and all that you find it very helpful to kind of create those bases for both of you. So some similarities there, and then just kind of add in different like proteins or different sides that kind of complement what it is that you're doing.
The way he grazes and, I have to eat too, you could spend a lot of money just buying a whole lot of stuff that maybe doesn't get consumed. And there was that learning curve in the beginning to be like, okay, well, did I just buy this bag of spring mix so that I could toss it out later because we forget that it's in there in and amongst everything else? So it's been a learning curve of like, what can I make that we can both eat? Well, and not that I can't eat what he is, but what can, like, if I'm making veggie burgers, how many do I need to make so that we both have something? It's figuring out how your partner also eats. And it sounds like that's something simple, but it's like, I've learned over the years that if it's not labeled and he can't see it, he won't eat it. In our fridge, I actually learned that you can use like the paint pens on the plastic containers and just wash them off, because it'll say things like strawberries, blueberries, hard-boiled eggs, because he won't pull them out to like see what's in it. If he can see that like something's already prepped there and he doesn't have to cook it, because he's not somebody that cooks things if he doesn't have to, he will pull the easiest thing out. And it's like, I would realize that things were disappearing. And I was like, okay, so now I have to know, like, we have a conversation about, okay, I've prepped this, this, and this for you for lunches this week. And like everything, this is what it is, because things would go bad because he just wouldn't like look for the blueberries.
Yeah, totally. So that communication piece is like super helpful as well.
Yes, it is super helpful. And knowing how your partner is eating or how your family is eating, because he is a big kid, but we don't have children, but from what I've seen, it's like, you do all this planning for your kids to like grab things and do that. And I just started realizing that, I could put some of those techniques into play with my husband, so that I knew what was in the fridge. He knew what was in the fridge. And there wasn't like this constant miscommunication of what was available to eat, what was something that was prepped for a meal later this week, and all of that kind of fun. So it's like figuring out the systems that work for you and your partner and how you can implement them to be easiest.
Lauren is another plant-based registered dietitian. And what we talk about is that she didn't tell anyone that she was going vegan. She just did it. So here's what she has to say. It sounds like you didn't really put a whole lot of pressure on yourself to just go fully vegan. Like you allowed yourself to transition in a way that felt good for you. And I feel like a lot of times, like a lot of listeners or clients even that we work with feel like they have that pressure to like go overnight, but it sounds like the way you did it, it felt good. It worked out.
Oh, it did. You know what? I didn't even tell anyone that I was trying to go vegan. And there's so many different reasons for that and facets of that in terms of, I was a dietitian, I was becoming a dietitian, and I didn't want to feel judged. Even, 4 years ago, times were different in terms of what we knew about eating vegan or plant-based or vegetarian. And exactly like you said, I didn't want to put that pressure on myself. I didn't want to say I was vegan and then have a moment of weakness and my friends and family be calling me out and things like that. So that's something I even really encourage my clients to do if they don't feel comfortable to make the announcement that they want to go vegan or that they are vegan, to just take it at your own pace and keep that to yourself for as long as you feel like you want to.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. If we're out to eat with family and friends, unless they were secretly trying to go vegan, we don't have to justify, what we order at a restaurant. And two, I
Yeah.
really like what you said too. Like if, you're at a restaurant and you're like, oh no, I actually do want, the chicken sandwich or whatever it is, that's okay. Like it's you kind of just figuring out how you can navigate this journey for yourself and make it sustainable long term.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And especially when you're first trying to make this transition to a more plant-based or vegan or vegetarian diet, there can be so many questions from friends and family. And sometimes it can make you feel a little bit defensive. And so maybe you don't know all of the information. Maybe you don't know all of the evidence and the studies and things like that. So taking that at your own pace is totally okay. And as you go on, you'll probably become more confident.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That confidence piece just starts slowly building as you're going along. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Karla is a registered dietitian. She's at Vegan Kids Nutrition on Instagram. And in our conversation, we discuss how to make sure your child is getting everything that they need on a vegan diet. And one thing I love about Karla is she's so great at putting your stress to rest when it comes to making sure that your child is getting everything that they need. So here's Karla. What kind of things maybe do you recommend? Just things that maybe parents can keep in mind to not obviously stress about, but also to just making sure that their child is getting everything that they need.
Yeah, it can be a little bit concerning to not know whether they are meeting their nutrient needs, especially when the child eats quote unquote not enough. And so to us, it may not be like it's enough for them, but to the child, when they are in tune with their own appetite and they know what, how much food they need to be satiated, that's how we know that our children are meeting what they need. And so a lot of the times I tell parents that when you add variety to the meals, from grains, legumes, fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, when you add those foods to the diet and you ensure that there are different types of foods at each meal, you are more likely to have your child meet those nutrient needs because you're adding variety to throughout the day. And so, yeah, it can be concerning when the child doesn't eat a certain food at a meal. Most of the time, parents feel like, well, they didn't eat their chickpeas. And so now they're not getting their protein. And that's a perfectly valid feeling. And yes, it may be true. They didn't eat their chickpeas. And so they didn't eat their protein for that meal. But there's other opportunities throughout the day where that nutrient requirement can be met. So if they didn't eat their chickpeas during lunchtime, well, maybe at snack, we can offer some hummus and pretzels for them to meet that requirement. And so it's all about finding variety throughout the day, but also finding meals and snacks that the child is willing to eat to ensure that those nutrients are met. And at the end of the day, if they didn't eat anything, then at least a daily multivitamin would bring a little bit of comfort to us to know that they're meeting those nutrient requirements.
I like that. Kind of having a supplemental force there if needed, when
Yeah,
needed, to make you feel a little
exactly.
bit better. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I like too that you almost talked about like almost zooming out and looking at the day as a whole, or kind of on a day-to-day basis as a whole, versus maybe being so hyper focused on one particular meal.
Yes, I'm glad that you brought that up because it's something that we often talk about when it comes to client sessions where, we, at least from a parent's perspective, we focus on solely one meal and sometimes even one particular food at that meal. But a lot of the times, if we take the time to step back and sort of see a bird's eye view of the day and even the week, we see that our child is actually eating more variety than we thought. And so taking that perspective can help in knowing that our child is meeting their key nutrients.
Yeah. Gives you a bit more peace of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Koen is an intuitive eating coach, and we talk about his advice for people who are struggling with intuitive eating, that intuitive eating is not intuitive at first. And he goes on to discuss tips for people who are struggling and how you can create structure and challenge food rules. Here's what Koen has to say. People who are maybe in a similar situation that you were in, where listening to hunger fullness cues, it's like, I don't know. And I don't really know what my body's telling me. I don't know what feels good and what doesn't. I don't know what is making me sluggish or what's making me feel energetic. What are like some tangible tools or even things that you would go back and tell yourself of like steps that you can take to just be a bit more present, a bit more in touch with what your body is trying to tell you?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think the journey starts a little bit before that. I'm a big fan of Colleen Christensen from like No Food Rules. That's like my main source of information. Like I soak up everything that she does. And she shared a post like quite recently where she said, intuitive eating isn't intuitive at first.
Yes.
And
wow.
that was really, really eye-opening, because the thing with intuitive eating is that it only works if you really know how to listen. But most of us, we come from a damaged place, right? We come from a damaged body. We come from diet mentality, diet mindset, diet culture. So we have all these food rules that are basically like preventing us to listen. Like the intermittent fasting rule, I have to eat at this time and I cannot eat at that time. And carbs at this time make me gain weight and I have to finish my plate. So we're basically making all these decisions based on rules, external rules, instead of internal rules or internal information. So a big part of the intuitive eating process at first is not intuitive. It's first of all learning how to get your body back to its normal metabolism, which is a really important part of it, because ignoring those hunger and fullness signals, what a lot of people experience is that, hey, but Koen, I just don't feel hungry. Or, but Koen, I never really feel satisfied. That's because there's many reasons, but it's because we have been ignoring and not listening too long. So the first thing that we actually often need is structure. And the structure is going to help us to listen. So if you struggle with hunger and fullness signals and you're not really sure where to start with, start first of all planning your meals. Have set times. Have a breakfast at 8 or at 9 if that's a better time for you. Have a lunch at 1 or 2. Have a dinner at 5 or 6. Because the intuitive journey to me is all about collecting data, collecting information. And the more information you get, the easier it gets to make different decisions. So having that structure can then allow you to start to ask questions by, for example, keeping a little food journal for yourself. Ask yourself, when did I eat? What did I eat? Where did I eat? Ask yourself, how hungry was I before I started eating? On a scale of like 0 to 10, and 0 being not hungry at all, 10 being completely starving. Ask yourself if there are maybe certain thoughts or feelings or rules that are coming up before, during, and after your meal. And then obviously as well, like how I'm feeling after. So start collecting that data so that from that space on, you can start making different decisions. Oh, that meal I had at 8 o'clock this morning, I was actually not hungry at all. So maybe let's try tomorrow half an hour later, see how that feels. Oh, now I was actually pretty hungry. I was like at 6. So, okay, maybe 8:30 is better for me, right? And then you don't need that fixed rule anymore. You just know that around that time, you learn how to listen. So structure, I think, is always a really important first step for the majority of the people, let me say it like that. And then the second one, and that's probably one of the biggest ones, really breaking through the food rules. Stop listening to the food police.
Yes. Yeah, that you're right though. That's a really tough one for people, is breaking some of those rules that they either had as a kid or that they've learned via diet culture. It is really, it's tough to challenge those rules that we carry around with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's also why I like to have like some structure with that as well. Because if you have that structure in place, it becomes a lot easier. A change, I always say, comes through awareness. So the more aware about the rules, the more aware about like the triggers and the tendencies that you have, the easier everything gets.
Yeah.
So I always say like the first part is like to recognize what are the food rules, what are the triggers, or like what is triggering the rule, or what is triggering the emotional eating or the binge eating, or what is triggering you to suppress your emotions through food, for example. And what's that tendency? How does that look like? Will I go to the supermarket? Will I open my fridge? What happens in my body? Because the more you can start to recognize these patterns and these triggers, the easier it then gets to stop yourself from actually doing it. But this is always the first part.
Yeah.
And then as well, it's like to just be able to accept them, right? As long as you are in this battle mode on the battlefield, and you're like, that's not good, and that's not good, and I shouldn't do this, and I shouldn't do that, it's creating only more friction, and from that friction comes more negative energy. So you need to be able to just say, okay, this happened, that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that, that just is. What can I do now to change it? And then I think the last 2 steps is learning how to recognize where it is coming from. So where did you pick up that rule, or where did you pick up that tendency or that trigger? Is that something from a childhood trauma, or is that something from all the media and fashion magazines that you've been reading all your life? And then the last part is like, how can I change this into a positive? So for example, a common food rule, carbs are gonna make me fat, or I cannot eat after 8 p.m. You can change that into something like, I learn how to listen to my body, and if I'm hungry, I eat no matter the time.
Yeah.
Or I eat what feels good no matter the time of the day. I like figure something out that resonates with you. But there's so many easy and clever ways how you can change those food rules. And then the last part, which is really important about establishing like new beliefs, is that you're going to find evidence for that. Because just saying it doesn't finalize it. So you have to go out there and test these things, try them out, challenge your food rules, sit with your plate without distraction, eat those foods for yourself that are off limit, eat that food that you're not supposed to. And that's really where I think everything comes together.
Lucy is a health at every size dietitian, and in our conversation, we discuss emotional eating and having the self-awareness to not ask, should or shouldn't I eat this, but do I actually want this? And how you can tune out the noise, listen to your body, and allow your body lead you, all while rejecting diet culture. Let's listen to Lucy.
This can be difficult if this is the first time you're doing this, because honestly, when I ask my clients this, they're like, I have no idea. So be gentle with yourself listening to this, but a lot of food rules are a lot of shoulds, and you should do this or you shouldn't do that. And this is basically someone else's opinion or whatever. It's like someone else's influence over you. And what is happening is you're not actually tuning into your body. So instead of saying I should or shouldn't have this, turn it inward and ask yourself, do I want this? Do I want this? Because a lot of times I work with people who emotionally eat or binge, and a lot of times binging really sucks. Like it feels terrible. Nobody wants that. So instead of asking yourself, should I do this or should I not do this? That's when you are out of touch with yourself and you're not able to let your body lead you. And so when you ask yourself, do I actually want this? What would I want? What would feel really nourishing for me right now? It's easy to build confidence from that place because you're not asking, is it the right or wrong thing? You're tuning into yourself and you're always going to have the answers. But if you're new to that practice, you may not feel that way. So it takes a little bit of like strengthening your relationship with yourself to ask, like, what is it that I want?
I love that. Taking it from like, what should I do, to what is it that like I truly want in this moment? Like, what is going to nourish me or make me feel good or whatever that is. Like, just again, it sounds like just being a little bit more intentional, or just taking that time, like a few extra seconds or minutes to just put a little bit of thought into the decision.
Because a lot of times people will find like, oh, I actually really need just some comfort right now, or I need to just go take a walk. And then when you take care of your emotional need, you can come back. And what I tell people is, commit to a non-food action of self-care, and then come back and say, do I want this food or not? You're going to feel a lot more clear, because the win is not being able to say no to a food. It's being able to like choose it with an empowered mindset, or say no to it from an empowered mindset. So that's why that self-care is like super important.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Choose it with like an empowered mindset. I think that is so fabulous. And with this, like, why would you say even this approach, rejecting these things that are being thrown at us, trying to take these labels away from food, trying to revert it back to like, what is it that I truly want? Why is this important? Or why do you see the clients that come to you, what does this kind of help them do in the long run? Or why is it valuable for people?
It's like being able to bring your authentic self to all areas of your life, because a lot of the times when we are really subscribing to, again, like diet mentality, it's a lot of shoulds, shouldn't, you should do that, you have to look like this, you have to eat like this, otherwise you're not good enough. And it really gets into this place of like not feeling worthy and feeling like you have to do the right things to become worthy. And so when you're able to start rejecting that mindset, you're able to start feeling worthy within yourself as you are exactly in this moment. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of people to reach, because like we live in diet culture, we're really immersed in it. And so it's really hard to be like, wait, I can eat a brownie and I'm actually like an okay person. Wow. I don't have to feel guilty. I don't have to feel shameful. Wow. That's amazing. And so we have the privilege of knowing a lot of nutrition knowledge, and a lot of people don't. And so they're going off of these rules to say, I think I need to eat this, but this is the right thing, but this is the wrong thing. And you have yourself constantly second guessing yourself. And that's really going to spill over into many areas of your life. And if you have never even had that thought, like truly like look and see where there's other places where you may not feel confident, because everything is interconnected. And so when you start to tune in and say, what do I want? How do I like to eat? You will probably find that you do like eating vegetables sometimes. Like I think a lot of people are truly astounded to be like, wait, I actually wanted to eat like that quote unquote healthy option. What? This is wild. But it's because it's coming from this place where you're wanting to like honor yourself, and like it's like an authentic yes, it's an empowered yes. And so you start to build this knowledge of yourself, because when you're trying to like fit into a box of like shoulds or shouldn'ts, you don't even know who you are. You're just trying to like fit, check the box of what other people want you to be. And so I had a client recently say, she's like, oh, I'm trying to be what other people want me to be, and I have this fear of not living up to my full potential. But if I'm trying to just be what other people want me to be, I'm never going to live up to my potential.
Wow.
Boom. Like she's so young. And so she impressed all of my clients, truly impressed me so much. But there's just like this deep inner wisdom and confidence that comes out when you start to reject the diet mindset. And it sounds so trivial to be like, wow, I'm just going to choose foods that really serve me, make me feel good. But it like truly, when you start practicing this, it goes into such a deeper level, and you free up so much more mind space to enjoy many other facets and areas of your life.
Until next time, keep thriving.